Welcome to another episode of By the Word of Our Testimony, presented by the 668 Show. I am Zach, your host, and today I've got a special episode for you. It is completely recorded on the phone, and I was talking to Daniel Malone. Daniel Malone is a guy that has a blind ministry. He was not born blind. He ended up being part of a tragic accident that left him permanently blind after failed surgeries attempt to try and repair his eyes. He wrote a book. This is his book right here. And it's an excellent book, I will say. And I had a fantastic time just having a conversation with him. You're going to hear this. It's going to be completely audio only. There's not going to be any visuals. I will say that if you will like this video, comment, and subscribe to this channel, I will give away 3 of these books right here to individuals that do that. You will be entered into a drawing, and 3 of you will get it. I can send you out a copy physically like this. You can get it digitally. Either way, like, share, and subscribe if you want to enter into a drawing to be able to get this book. With further ado, here we go, and let's just jump right into it. I am talking to Dan Malone, and he wrote a book called Blindness is Not the End: Faith Over Fear, a Physical and Spiritual Journey. This book details how he ended up becoming blind, how he ended up messing up a lot of his life, and how he just was hopeless and despair, and how he ended up coming to know Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior through a lot of other people pouring into him, giving him hope, giving him a vision that he couldn't physically see, but ultimately helping direct him so that he finds success in what he puts his hands to, and finding success in his family life, in his marriage, in his kids' life, and becomes an inspiration for many people as he now leads a blind ministry. And you can find more of his information at blinddan.com, and that is going to be in the description down below. Dan, I read your book and thoroughly enjoyed it. It it gave me insight into a man who thought that family life was just going to be fine and dandy. When you ended up getting this girlfriend of yours pregnant, and you end up eloping, you think that you're going to have a good life, and ultimately it leads you to blindness. Did I get any of that right?
Yeah, that's pretty close, and I thank you for this introduction. That's great. Yes. Mhm.
Um, some things really stood out to me, and we'll get to those things later on. But just tell us a little bit about yourself before you became blind.
Yeah, I was a boy growing up in a junkyard with the town dump next to me, and I tell you what, they didn't do anything for my self-esteem. I've had low self-esteem all my life, and I look back at my childhood, even when I was sighted, how much I was depressed and felt less than everybody else in my whole life. And it didn't matter what happened to me because I was so depressed. And I was just feeling sorry for myself most of my childhood because I went into the insecure comparing mode, comparing myself to everybody else, and it wasn't the right place to be. But I lost my brother next to me in Vietnam, as all 4 of my older brothers went into service in each different service, in each different branch. But I can look back now and see that in this book I try to describe where there was spiritual blindness. And I had no idea how to live whatsoever. And so I just did what I saw, my older brothers. And it turned out to be pretty destructive in a wild, crazy life. Because my brother, next older brother, after Dickie died, took me under his wing, And we started going to bars, as he was a very severe alcoholic. And that was a lifestyle I was fitting into as, as it brought me to his lifestyle and playing pool and drinking and all that. Did you want me to go into the story, or do you want me to? What do you?
Okay,
Where you got to go from here?
so I know that where your book starts off is that you're definitely in this junkyard, and one of the things that you're learning at the age of 14 is how to drink. Um, you get alcohol and into your hands, and you're learning how to play cards. You're learning pull pull.
Yeah.
You're learning how to play pool, and you think this life is just grand. You're entrenched, you're sucked in at such a young age, and many young guys and ladies out there that they do start off young. Uh, it's I wish I could say that that wasn't the case for some people that are very close to me. When they ended up getting hooked on drugs and drinking right around that same age. I would say a couple years younger than that, around like maybe 11 or 12, when they first get introduced to alcohol and drugs. And I've watched how substance abuse destroys every aspect of their life completely. And it's
Yeah,
sad. It's absolutely sad. It's a
it
real
is.
thing that takes place. Um, and and whenever it comes to redemption, when it comes to a story where Christ comes in and intervenes and brings order into the chaos, you are evidence of this in your life. Um, so from there, here you are, 14. Tell us a little bit about that bar scene as between 18 and say 24.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to get into that because even though we had a junkyard, I had a pool table, and the place I lived in. When after Dickie died, we moved to another place, and I had a pool table down there. So I played a lot of that, and I really loved playing pool. That was like my favorite sport. So by the time my brother Kenny took me to the bar, I was a really good pool player, and so was he. And we would hustle at the bars, him and I, even at age 14. At age 15, he took me to a pool tournament,
Wow.
little
Okay.
place, little place called Pink Pony, and I was the best in three racks. And I was the last one to play, and I did all the balls and 51 shots, and I won first place. That's why I love playing pool. And but the thing is, the key that changed my life there was at age 14 at the centenarian. My brother gave me 2 quarters. That tells my age. He said, "Danny, go get us a beer." And I was scared to death. Went up to the bartender, and I gave, can I have two beers? And he went and got them for me, and I gave him 2 quarters, and that changed my whole life. At age 14, and what the alcohol did for me was give me that false courage. And it wasn't, when I first took the alcohol, it wasn't an answer, it was the answer I was looking for because I was scared all my life. Like I said, I had no direction whatsoever. My parents were so busy trying to raise 7 kids that there wasn't time for one-on-one. And that's why I was talking about the low self-esteem and just feeling alone all the time,
Yeah.
even amongst a loving family, because we all loved each other and we don't do anything for each other, but I just felt alone. So Kenny, my elder brother, he's got the worst story of an alcoholism I've ever seen. Um, and I know a lot of alcoholic stories. He had built up 18 driving while intoxicated, and he's been in 12 rehabs, and he's been in AA. and that scared me to death. And so there came a point, even though I was drinking with him those couple of years, there came a point where he was getting too bad and I couldn't hang around with him anymore. And I had to detach myself from him and going on my own drinking style. But at a very young age, and I really thank God for this, I was either going to go into the service, Marines, where my brother Dickie died, or I went to a major company and I said, if I don't get a job today, I'm going to go in the service. And they hadn't hired anybody in like 4 years. But
Mm. Oh, wow.
that day, they decided to hire 29 people, and I was one of them at age 17. And even with the low self-esteem and not knowing any idea what to do, two guys come up to me and they accepted me. I felt like a little kid, and I was a little kid at age 17. I was emotionally really like probably a 14-year-old, and they leading me along. They accepted me, and is this what you got to do? Do this, do this. And thank God that I was able to stay and work every day. Um, and that's where I got my pay, my benefits, and it's actually a lifelong because I was retired from that company. I'm very grateful for that. Even though I was in full blown alcoholism, I stayed in there and hung in there.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And so, so having gone through that, I had a little family there with the apartment. Went and I was going to be totally responsible to have a family, my wife and child. And but there was another place that I walked into. It was a bar near where I work. And when I went into that bar at lunch one day, the music was on and the partying was on. There were people drinking, and I fell in love. It was like walking into the land of Oz from Kansas. It was just like the Wizard of Oz. I fell in love with the atmosphere, and this is what I wanted. This is where I wanted to be. And so it was a huge impact on me. This bar, and I wanted to be there every minute I could. So therefore, my wife and child was at home, and I was totally irresponsible. And of course, that marriage didn't last very long because of that behavior. So
So how long did it take between when you eloped? You ended up getting, I believe, from the book, I think you mentioned that you were in a mobile home at the time. Is that correct? Or is that
yeah,
wrong?
yeah, two different times. I was in the first mobile home with her, and she was like 25 miles from where I worked.
Okay.
But the bar was only half a mile from where I worked. So I spent
Okay.
most of the time at the bar. And therefore that marriage didn't last at all. So we gave up the mobile home. And I
So
moved in
about
with
how
my
long were you
parents.
married to her during this time?
Oh, probably not probably a year.
A year. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
because in the book it seems like things spiral out of control very fast, and so that makes sense. Whenever a year, it's like here's what you're doing. You've developed a relationship with the bartender here. Hey, people, if you really want to know a lot about this, check out his book. I really highly recommend it. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Westbow Press. You can even get it at blinddan.com. It is a fantastic read. I totally recommend it. 5 star it. In fact, my review will be posted up here very shortly. You'll probably see the review on the website before this even goes live. So anyway, check out his book. So back to this story. You are here. You are. You're in the bar. There's phone calls. Your wife at the time, your ex-wife at this time. She knows the bar's number, so she already expects you here. And uh, what did she think was actually going on, or did she just? tried to convince herself that you were, I don't know, walking home? I mean, like 25 miles, that isn't, but maybe a 30-minute drive, or maybe even a hour drive, I guess, depending on the speed limit. Um, what did she think whenever she calls up the bar and they're like, oh, he's not home? And how long would you stay at the bar before you actually went home?
Yeah, I know. I'll never forget that. The bartender was trained, picked up the phone. He said, "No, he's not here." He turned to me and he said, "That was your wife." I'm not very proud of that, but that's what happened. So I smiled and ordered another beer. And there's a term for this. I call it an egotistical maniac with an inferiority complex. So I'm scared to death, but I'm in total control when I'm drinking, you know. So,
Okay.
and that's what I wanted everybody in my life to understand as an active alcoholic. Is I'll do anything you want, just but I want you to know that my drinking's included because I was so scared to give that up. Because I talked about comparing earlier, insecure comparing, and now I'm talking about my brother that took me under his wing and drinking together. I was comparing myself to him. And when I did that, he was in and out of jails and rehabs. He lost his license. And so I was comparing myself to him and always saying, boy, I'm glad I'm not as bad as him. I can keep on drinking. And I kept on drinking for years after that. And but my ex-wife, who had my child, decided she wanted to do other things, and I was trying to figure out how I could be a better dad to my son, 2-year-old son, and she come up to me one day and she says, "Would you like to take Corey?" And I said, "Yes, yes, I'll be a dad to him." It's because she wanted to go on with her life without him. And that's just the person who she was. I'm not trying to downgrade her or anything. That's who she was. So I wanted to be this responsible dad. But I had and then had a family, a mom and dad and two sisters that would. I said, "Can you take care of them when I go to the bar?" And they said, "Yeah, no problem at all." So in a way, they were kind of enablers. So
Mm,
and
okay.
they actually like bringing them up at this time. I was going to work and at the bar. And I felt bad about that after like a year. And I said, I got to be a better dad. So here's where the other mobile home comes in. I went shopping for a home and I found this little two-bedroom mobile home. And I said, I'm going to be a dad to my son, Corey. And so we went and moved into the mobile home. But keep in mind, I still wanted to drink. So I found a babysitter and I dropped him off before work, about 6 o'clock in the morning. And then after the work, I decided to go to the bar, and I'd leave about 10 o'clock at night and go pick him up from the babysitter. And that's what he knew for like 6 months. And so his life was brought up at the babysitters. And
Wow.
this is all encompassed in alcoholism.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
During
but
this
I was,
period, was there any like prayer going on or church life? Was there anybody in your life that was trying to reach into you and speak to you about Jesus, or even preach the gospel of some sort? Was any of that going on?
this is a great question. I love this question because I realize now, looking back, that there were very humble people praying for me. And there was never anything pushed in my face about it at all. No. But I realized my dad had it so rough with us kids being so out of control and destructive. I know he was praying for me, and of course my mother and siblings were, and other people that knew me. I'm sure, even the ones I was drinking with at that special bar, they were more functional than I was. They had families and they were doing family responsible things, and they cared about my behavior. But I was like a wild and running. all the time I could. But my drinking's included, you understand, and that's what I wanted everybody to understand. So, and I was scared to death to quit drinking because of my brother Kenny and his destructive lifestyle.
Right.
You know, we grew up in that junkyard, and we all had all kinds of license plates. You know, passenger plates, dealer plates, things you can put on with a spring. So Kenny kept coming home from the service and borrowing the cars, Dad's cars, from the junkyard. And I can say, Kenny's dead now, but I can say he probably smashed up in total probably 50 to 60 cars
Whoa.
in accidents. He would get every weekend he came home, he smashed up a couple cars, and it was like unbelievable.
That's amazing. You know,
Yeah,
that
it is amazing.
I can't even imagine that. I've owned less than a handful of cars in my lifetime, and to think of smashing up 50 of them,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
wow, that's a fortune to me.
yeah. I know. He probably had most of his bones broken in his body.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
so about how old were you when you were going to this bar? So you were 17 when you got the job, and when you walked
yeah,
into this bar, about how old were you?
18.
18.
So
Okay.
yeah, yeah, and then so I spent a lot of time at the bar, and really didn't know what was going on in my family uh, at home or my family of origin because I spent so much time at that bar. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
In fact, after the accidents, I missed it so much that I collected every song that was on that jukebox because I was powerless at home.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So fast forward, you end up ruining that marriage, and then you meet this other girl that's a waitress, right? At
Yes,
the
yes. I call this dysfunctional relationships.
yes.
Yes, because I go to the bar with my friends for lunch, and this waitress comes out, and it's like something clicks. This is the one I gotta have. This is the woman I want, you know. And I wanted to get to know her, and eventually, um, I got the courage with enough alcohol in me to ask her out, and she said yes. And then we kind of, this is while I had Corey in the mobile home, two-bedroom mobile home. And she said yes. And after the physical relationship started, we stopped at her house to get her son, the same age as my son. And she brings out her pots and pans. I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "Me and my son are moving in." And why? But anyway, this became a solution. I got a babysitter now. Permanent babysitter. I don't. So I figured this was going to work out good because, and so I can go back to the bar. And so we were in there for a while, but it was a little too small. We had to get a bigger mobile home and did that. And it was fine. And then there was a misunderstanding, and I want to talk about alcoholism here because the alcoholism, the ism is the I, self, and me
Yeah.
at the end. That stands for, to me it does. And we got in an argument one night, and the next morning I got up and took the morning drink, and I never did that. I never took the morning drink. I always drank in the afternoons, evening. And I was so upset about the argument the night before, that I called my buddy Joe. And we go motorcycle riding together. I said, "Come on, you want to get on the bikes?" He says, "Sure." And we both had to work evenings that night. And so we started at the first bar about 25 miles further away. Just took a bike ride and we started getting drinking. And by the time we got back to my favorite bar near where I work, I was so drunk out of my mind, I called my boss and I said, his name was Gene. And I said, Gene, I can't make it out. I can't make it to work today. There's a blizzard here. And this was August 17th. And he knew exactly what I was meant because he could hear how drunk I was in my voice. So he kind of enabled me too. So I told him I wasn't coming in. And I turned around and I decided I'm going to get drunk. And I told the bartender it was $1 a shot, and I gave him $20. I said, give me 20 shots of liquor. And I drank them down. Now, when I went to leave, we were going to go to my brother's house. And it wasn't pretty. I was trying to race my buddy Joe again on his bike, and his bike was always more powerful than mine. But this time I was determined to beat him. And we left the starting point, and by the time I was doing like over 100 miles an hour, and I hit a car head on with a motorcycle.
Yes.
And it was a brand new Chevy Kingswood Estate wagon, and my motorcycle totaled that car. But it catapulted me up above the telephone wires and 160 feet down the road. So I was sliding across along the road, so my back was all meat. It was open meat. And of course, my helmet cracked, got a concussion, collapsed lung, and and both legs were broke, the femur. And I was like dead. In fact, the police both gave me CPR. And the ambulance, it just happened to be, this is how God works, okay? Right at the scene of the accident was a school with a football game going on. And there was an ambulance already there. And so as soon as the cops were done, the ambulance took over. And years later, this kid come up to me after I talked. And he says, I can't believe you're standing here because my mother was chief of the ambulance and she took your helmet off and declared you dead.
Wow.
I said,
Wow.
really? Yeah, yeah, yeah. They took me in the ambulance, and on the way in, my heart stopped again, and intensive care stopped again. So it was pretty messed up. And they didn't know I had a collapsed lung. They just thought I was out of it. They thought I was like brain dead. When I came to, I was fighting them all over the place, and they pumped up my lung again. And no repercussions from that, though. It worked out. But I
Yeah,
was in,
yes.
yeah,
Because you ended up you broke your legs, your body's in all kinds of misshapen stress from smacking pavement after
yeah.
how high up in the air did they say that you fell or
I know I flew over the telephone wires,
okay,
and
yeah, you flew over the
yeah,
telephone wires. So
you
you're
said
at least
160
50
feet, 160 feet down the road. You know,
160 feet down the road.
yeah,
And if they are 45-foot poles, you probably flew 45 feet up in the air, maybe more, maybe
maybe
50.
more. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
that is wild. All right, so you end up, this is not the accident though that led you to
No,
blindness, right?
no, no.
Um,
But this accident did leave me in a body cast for a year and a half.
that's how long
And
it was, a year and a half. Wow.
well, it's actually like um, 10 months, and I got the body cast off finally. But I didn't quit drinking because of this accident. I went back to drinking because I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah.
But I was walking with a wooden cane, and the girlfriend and I were still together, and we're not married yet. And decided to go back up to that favorite bar for the good times. And we're sitting at the bar, and all of a sudden the song came on, my favorite song I wanted to dance to. So I said, "Come on, we're going to dance." We get out on the dance floor, and I'm dancing away because I'm drunk, and all of a sudden I feel this crack in my leg.
Mm.
Oh my God! Oh my God! and people carry me out to the car. And I go to the doctor the next day. And, well, we got to put the body cast back on.
Oh my
That's what I say.
gosh.
Yeah, I was not a happy camper. I had to put
I
the body
imagine
cast
not.
back on for like another 8 months. Yeah, I had to be real careful after that. Yeah, and so anyway, I still was drinking, but then after a while, after like a year and a half, I went back to work. I had a walking cane, a wooden walking cane, and I went back to work where they saved my job, and it was great. And then this time I was driving tow motor, and I get a page over the intercom for me to come to the office. It was my girlfriend telling me my dad had passed during the night. And this is where it starts a spiritual journey.
Okay.
Because my dad was the only person on this earth I can confide in and talk to. And he accepted me unconditionally and he loved me unconditionally. In other words, he was God to me. And anybody that knew my dad, anybody would say the best things about him. He was the most loving, accepting man you ever met. He had a lot of wisdom, and my whole world fell in when I heard the news. And I couldn't. It just like turned my world all around upside down. And it took a long time for a lot of people grieving my father's death, but I had to go on with my life. And so my mother's going to decide she's going to sell the house. And so I come home from work with my brothers, and we're going to get the house ready for auction, and we're all feeling sorry for ourselves, and we break out the beer. And my brother gives me a beer, and we start drinking, and of course, with alcohol, once you start feeling things, the alcohol can only magnify it.
Right.
So it made us feel worse and worse, and by the end of the night, we had to go to a different bar. We went there and played some pool, drank, got really drunk. But the thing is, my oldest brother was with us this time, and he was a drinker. He was my drinking buddy, but I didn't know that he couldn't handle his alcohol anymore. And whatever he said goes, as far as I'm concerned, because he's my older brother. So he wanted to drive. And so we got in his little Datsun, and I didn't know that he couldn't handle his alcohol anymore. So we go down to go down Lake Road. We're going to go to the cemetery to pour beer over my dad's grave. That's how
Oh wow.
that's how,
Okay.
that's how much self pity we had. We just wanted to take a beer down there and pour it on his grave. But we didn't make it because my brother was so drunk that he couldn't drive. He missed a curve and ran into a telephone pole where my door was. I was on the passenger side. And the car hit a ditch at the same time. So it flipped it end over end and then rolled several times. And I was trapped in the car. The top came in on me, the back seat came in on me. The engine came in and broke both my legs again. Both legs were, and it shattered my hip, sheared my hip off. And I was trapped in the car, and the battery came through the dash and broke over my face. And the battery acid ate the eyes out of my head. And I remember, the only thing I remember about it is breathing battery acid and tasting it and had to swallow it. And it took them 2 hours to get me out of that car with the jaws of life. They had to use hydraulics to get me out of the car.
Is the picture of the car that's in the book that car that you were in that you ended up getting blinded in?
Yes, that's the picture.
That's
It's in
uh
the chapter. It's in the
that's
third
a
chapter.
gruesome picture. That's a gruesome picture. Is it possible that you could email me that picture so that I could put that up on the screen for those that are listening?
Oh, sure. You can have it in color because in the book it's black and white.
It is
Yeah,
black and white, yeah.
in the
So
book, but
guys, if
I
you're
can give it to you in color. Yeah.
awesome, if you're looking at if you're watching, just look up right here. Look, that's the car right there. That's amazing. Okay, all right. So, um, go on because
And
now.
But yeah, I found out that the ambulance crew, people in the ambulance, I talked to them later.
Hmm.
Uh, no, I talked to the people that talked to the ambulance crew was on that night. And the doctor that was in charge of the ambulance crew ordered no saline solution on that rig, on the ambulance. So they
Okay.
couldn't rinse my eyes out. They couldn't do anything with them. So my eyes didn't get any treatment until like 2.5 hours later in emergency. So the damage is already done by the time I got to the hospital for the
Right.
battery acid. Yeah.
Right.
And so, and when I came to in the bed, of course I couldn't see anything. And my legs, both legs are in traction now. And casts. And the thing is, they didn't do anything about my legs, really. All they did was put them in casts. They didn't set them or anything because of my eye damage. And so they called in an ophthalmologist the next day, and he ended up putting Eastman glue on both my eyeballs um, just to give it a covering until it grew back. And it took a month for the glue to, for my eyes to grow and build more cells for that glue to grow off. And that was like
Wow.
one of the hardest months of my life because I couldn't open my eyes, I couldn't shut them. It was so hard to sleep. It was torture for that, for my eyelids, inside of my eyelids, to feel that glue on my eyeballs. It
Wow.
was terrible. Yeah,
So what is it that they were I mean, they wanted your eyeballs to grow? Is it
they want
so
them to grow back. Yes,
interesting? Okay.
because the vitreous fluid was coming right out of it. The fluid inside my eyeballs. There
Yeah.
was nothing to keep the fluid in.
Okay.
They were burned off.
Okay. So
Yeah,
the
and
idea
so
was that the fluid get your eyeballs to have the fluid come back. Your body naturally would produce it, I'm assuming, at that point.
yeah. So it took a month for the cells in my eyes to grow back, and then the glue finally grew off. And then he wanted to do cornea transplants to give me a cornea so I could see again. And I would have done anything to see again. Um, and here's another thing about my self-esteem and my spirituality. No matter what I did in life, I always waited for something outside myself to give me the answer because inside myself, I didn't feel good about myself.
Okay.
So I depended on other things or other people to make me feel better. So this doctor came in and did the procedure of the glue. And I turned my whole will and my life over to him. And I'm just going to sit back and let him fix my eyes so I can see again. In other words, turn my will and my life over to him.
Yeah.
And so I've had 8 cornea transplants, a combination of both eyes. And he did the best he could. But every time I went to him, if I had a cornea, it would fail. It would always cloud over. I could see for like a day because my retinas were still okay. But I kept going back to him week after week after week, and he would test my glaucoma. And I had no idea what glaucoma was. I didn't know what the pressure meant, the numerals. Uh, and he would just tell me, he would test my eyes and he'd say, your pressure's at 60 today. And I had no idea what that meant. I had no reference. I found out later that it's supposed to be between 8 and 12. 10 is perfect. The perfect
Mm.
pressure in your eye is supposed to be 10. And he says, your pressure's, and he didn't have a bedside manner at all. He not a communicator at all. And here I am, and turned my whole will and my life over to him.
Wow.
He said, your pressure's at 60 today. Let's try this medicine. And I try this, and I go home. And you said, pressure's real high today. I didn't know that this pressure was burning my retinas in the back of my eyes. My retinas were fine. It was just the front of my eyeballs that were bad.
Oh,
So
wow.
all this time, this glaucoma that I had with this high pressure was melting my retinas away. And finally, they got to the point where they detached. And I even had an operation to reattach my retina, but it didn't work. It failed. So by the time I found out what was going on with glaucoma, I went totally blind from my retinas detaching.
Wow.
It wasn't really the eyeball damage that was the trauma from it because it gave me high glaucoma, and that's what ultimately took my vision from me totally.
Wow. Okay.
And my and because of the retinas detaching, both eyes died. So right now, I'm a very fortunate man because I've got prosthesis. This doctor in the city where I live, I went to him and he built me prosthesis, which are like 3/8 inch contacts. They're called shells. And right now, I have two shells in, and most people don't know I'm blind. In fact, everybody says I have beautiful eyes um, because I used to have green eyes. Now these are colored blue, and they look like real eyes. Nobody can tell I'm blind by looking at me unless I don't look at them or something like that. So I'm very fortunate. And all the acid burns I had in my face, my forehead, down my neck, they're all healed. And you'd never know I had an accident with battery acid.
It's true. You cannot tell by looking at you
Yeah.
that you've ever had an accident. Can't.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but a lot of people accepted me before that, before my prosthesis, even though I looked like a monster. In fact, there's one funny story about my wife and kids left one Sunday morning. In fact, it was January 1st, 1980. It was about a year after the accident, and my eyes look like a monster. They're sunken in. I can still see just a little bit, and they're anything but white. There's no whites in my eyes. It's green, blue, yellow, and a lot of blood veins right in the eyeballs. So I look like Frankenstein monster.
Wow. Okay.
And so she left, and you remember the grease in the pans of Crisco used to turn white when it was
Yeah.
cold?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to make myself a couple eggs. So I put the frying pan, I turned the burner on to melt the grease. And I went over to the fridge with my cane, my crutches, my cast on both legs. And I got a couple eggs out and I brought them over to the counter and I'm going to fry these eggs. But I put my face down close to the grease to see if it was melted yet. And all of a sudden it was so hot that it popped in my face. And I said,
Mm.
oh my God, I wonder if it hurt my eyes. And so I called the ambulance. And the guy came to the house and he opened the door and he looked at my face and he says, "Oh my God." I told him I had a grease burn. He said, "Oh my God, oh my God." I said, "No, it's not what you think, buddy. It's not what you think." So he thought somebody
You
had
see,
poured grease in my eyes.
from the yeah, because your eyes, like you said,
Yeah,
you look like Frankenstein. Wow,
yeah,
that's wild.
yeah. I said, I
So
just I just wanted to make sure it didn't hurt him anymore. That's all.
yeah. So
Mm.
you go into now you're blind. You're dealing with partial, very little sight, and this did not curb your appetite for alcohol at all, did it?
No, no, I was still drinking because I justified it. I said, I'm not hurting anybody but myself, so might as well drink.
And
I can't I can't drive anymore.
I think most people would definitely take that approach. You know, it's like I've gone through all this trauma. What the heck? I might as well feel good while I
Yeah,
can,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You,
exactly. Yeah.
you know, you mentioned in the chapter, it was early on in the book where you said like, I don't want I don't want to play the victim. This isn't about me being a victim or anything like this, but you're finding freedom and whatnot. So t tell us how you go from this self-esteem, low self-esteem, um, go from that point right there. You're blind. You're dealing with the blindness. You're dealing with the surgeries, um, and the failures that are happening because you end up uh, telling a story about this guy named Jimmy.
Yeah, yeah. Incredible story.
It really is. Tell us a little bit about Jimmy and how you end up with no sight, um, uh, getting the help that y'all are needing because he's having a diabetic coma.
Yeah. Well, this is in sobriety. Okay, I'm already sober and everything.
Okay, you're in sobriety
Um,
at this point. Yes.
at this
Okay.
point, yeah. Yeah, I can tell that story because that night was very. There was a very spiritual night. Um, Jimmy was the most accepting person. Um, he was my, I call him, he was my sponsor. That's somebody you call when you have trouble with an alcoholism, when you got to talk to somebody, kind of thing. They advise you to get a sponsor, so I chose Jimmy. And Jimmy had thick glasses because he had diabetes, affected his eyes and his health. And Jimmy had a lot of health problems, but he never complained about them. And and I could tell him the worst story ever about my blindness or what she did to me, and he would say, "Oh well." Um, he was just total acceptance.
Yeah.
And but he had gotten he had juvenile diabetes. At this point, he was like 36 years old. And we went to a meeting um, in Ontario, and it was 5 below 0. I mean, it was the dead of winter. And we went to the meeting and met everybody, and we had the meeting after the meeting. And on the way home, um, I knew all the roads. He got quiet for some unexplained reason. I didn't know why. I thought he was mad at me or something. And so I knew when we got to my town because there was a hill there and a traffic light, and he went to take me home. I said, "You can turn here, Jim." So he said, "Okay," and he passed the road. And there was like 3 roads he could have taken to get to my house. And I said, "You can turn up here in the second one." He says, "Okay," and he went straight. And he said, you can turn around up here on Sherburne Avenue, Sherburne Road." And he went past it, and he was agreeing to it. I'm kind of wondering what's going on. And then we got to the point where we went around the 2 bends. I know these roads by heart. I used to drive them all the time. Got to 2 bends, and then he kept going straight, but he wouldn't say anything. And finally, I realized he's in a diabetic coma. And he didn't even know I'm there. And then I felt him going over the canal bridge, which was the graded bridge.
Yeah.
I felt the tires going over that, I'm shaking him. I open the window, get air in there, and I'm shaking his arm. I'm saying, yelling in his ear, "Jimmy, can you hear me? Can you hear me?" And it'd be like 5 seconds. He said, "Yeah." And I said, okay?" I said, "Do you see a building across the street called the Yellow Mills? Do you see it? Do you see a building across the street?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Turn right here. Turn right." And we're going down Route 31, and I figured I'm gonna have him come back around the block, come back to my house. And I said, "Do you see a McDonald's on the left?" And these are all delayed. His reactions are totally delayed, 5, 10 seconds. And I kept yelling, "Do you see a McDonald's on the left?" He said, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "Okay, up here." I said, "Mobile Chemical. There's a Mobile Chemical. There's a big building up here. I want you to turn right. There's a light. Turn right at the light. Turn right. You see it?" He said, "Yeah." But we went straight. And finally, I said, "You see the Chevrolet dealer? It's on the left. On the left. Chevrolet dealer." And pull in there. Pull in there. I'm yelling, "Pull in there." And he pulls in. I said, "Stop the truck. Stop it. Stop it." And there's nobody on the road. It's too cold to be outside. We don't have, this is long before cell phones. And I took the keys and turned the truck off. And I said, "God, please help me. I don't know what to do. God, if you're there, please help me." So I checked the glove compartment to see if there was any candy. I checked under the seat. There's nothing. No candies, no nothing I can give him. And so I put the keys back in the truck. I started it. And I said, Jimmy, I need you to listen to me. And I need you to listen to me really strong. Do you hear me? Yes. I said, you need to pull out of the parking lot and turn right. And then he started the truck. He started going. We started going forward. I said, turn right out of the parking lot on Route 31. And I said, if there's a traffic light up here, and I'm yelling at him, shaking him, there's a traffic light. You see it? And I had to do this. I said, turn left there. And we were 19 miles away from home.
Yeah.
And I knew a way to get on 31F. And I says, up here, there's a turn right. It stops, there's a T there. I said, turn right at the road. And we got on 31. It turned into 350. And so we had to go like 5 or 6 miles before we got to the hill. And we need to turn right on the main drag. And I said, Jimmy, and we started going up the hill. I said, Jimmy, you need to take the next right turn. You see the light? You need to turn right. And he ended up turning right. I said, okay, Jimmy, there's a little store down here. It's a 7-Eleven or something. I forget what it was. You need to stop in that store. You see the store? You see the store? And he said, yes. I said, pull in there, pull in there. And so he pulled in there, and I don't know where he stopped. But stopped the truck. And I turned the keys off. I got out of the truck and went to his door. I pulled him out. I said, Jimmy, walk me to the door. Walk me to the door. Where's the door? And it's freezing. We're absolutely freezing. And he starts walking forward. And we get to the door, and I feel it. And I open the door, bring him in there, and I says, hello, can somebody help us, please? And I'm screaming. The girl says, what do you want? What do you need? I says, I need 2 bottles of pop right now. Please, please. And she went and got them, and I gave them to Jimmy. Drink this, drink this. And he drank one down. And after about a minute, he says, what are we doing in the store? I said,
That's
Jim,
amazing.
it was incredible. It was incredible. God was there that night. There's no doubt in my mind. He guided us home. He drank another bottle of pop. And I explained to him what we just went through. He said, wow, sorry, Dan. I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't even know. How do you know where we were? And
And you're blind. You're blind to
totally
this.
blind.
You're
Totally
totally
blind at this
blind.
point.
It's
Yes.
that's a what I found fascinating when I was reading chapter, because I think this was chapter 11 in your book, when you're talking about Jimmy. And something that really fascinated me about this story I, is the modern day, is that there's so many people that can't even go to their local supermarket without putting on the GPS unless they've been there several times. And they get lost. People get so lost without their cell phones. They get so lost without having a GPS on them. And you knew the road so well because you've gone up and down them with your sight so well, probably without a
Yeah.
map scope. And for those who don't know, because you're so young, a map scope was a map book that you could buy at any convenience store or grocery store, and it'll get you from here to anywhere in America. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and whatnot. Yeah, I'm old, I know. But it's fascinating. It's totally fascinating because I'm not even sure that if I were to be blind that I could direct myself from here to um anywhere. And I don't know if I know the roads that well. I don't even know if I'd even have that kind of confidence. Um and that is what blew my mind when it came to reading that story. And it's just powerful. And yeah, I think you're right. I think God was definitely there with you. And uh so Jimmy, how did you meet Jimmy?
NAA.
In AA. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yeah.
that. You met him in AA. He is your sponsor. And how long was he a part of your life going through AA?
Oh, probably um, 5 years. So
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
Another thing that I read in your book, your chapter, I believe it was called the CBVH Angels.
Yes. Mhm.
Um, just hit a little bit on that for a moment.
Yeah. Um, well, I'm going to back up a little bit because um, the marriage I was in, the house we were at, after she married me, where's her idea? She realized, she had an epiphany that she married a blind man. And really, she realized that she married a blind man for the rest of her life, and that's not a good thing. And so she went into her own self pity
Okay.
and started rebelling against us. And I had a long struggle trying to fix what was something that was unfixable. And I didn't know it was unfixable because I kept trying and trying and trying to do whatever I could, even though I was blind, to make life better for her.
Yeah.
So therefore, she would give me a lot of alone time. She would take the kids for the day and leave me. And this is really what part of my computer story, because it's another thing that God did for me, and I'm going to explain that later.
Yes.
But I was in self pity, lonely because nobody wanted to make waves to make my ex-wife upset that they came over. So not only I was separated from friends, I was separated from family too.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of alone time, and here I am in self pity. And when I turned my license in, um, that alerted the state of New York to that I'm blind and I can get blind services. So I get a phone call from this Linda, and she says, "Can I come out to your house? I'm going to show you some blind services." I said, "Sure, if you want, whatever." And she came and I sat down there, and she started talking to me about blind services and where she's from and everything. And she, we chit chatted a while, and it was acceptance. And it was like it was good. It was nice. And then she says, "I want to show you some stuff I got." And she put out this brought out this book and had bumps on it. And boy, that she handed me that, and I felt it. I said, "No way am I going to do that. I'm not going to lower myself to be a blind person," kind of thing. And boy, I was rebellious to that. And so she had to go back to just talking to me. And I did not want to be blind. In fact, I was in denial of blindness for quite a while. That's where I was um, relying on my old TV shows because I knew what the scenes were anyway. So I was denying that I was blind, watching my old TV shows, and I could just take solace in that. I was really happy about that I could watch my old TV shows and remember what the scenes were. But anyway, we got talking about it, and she says, "What do you miss?" I said, "I miss driving the most." She says, "Well, we can't do anything about that. But I said, "I used to play cards. I grew up playing cards." And then she brought up this um, deck of Braille cards. And it was, and I said, "Boy, I'd like to be able to play cards again." And she started, "Would you like to learn Braille?" I said, "Well, just to play cards." And she taught me Braille, and she showed me all this other stuff for blind, like um, blind things for utensils and measuring things and all that. And all that stuff came in handy. I was surprised how much the stuff there was for blind. And so, but playing cards again, that's what motivated me. It's okay, teach me Braille enough to play cards. And then I used it for labeling thousands of things. And I'm very organized with Braille labeling and talking stuff. And so she came into my life. And shortly after that, the next week, a girl named Sue called me. She says, "Can I come out?" And I'm from the blind too, kind of thing. And I said, well, if you want to. And she was like an instant friend. I mean, she was so nice. And I just loved being accepted, even though I looked like a monster. And I felt good to have somebody to talk to. And then she says, I want to show you something. And she pulled out this cane and she handed it to me. And I felt it and I says, no way, get this thing out of here. Nope, I'm not doing that. I'm just fine the way I am. Nope, I'm not doing that. I don't want to lower myself to be a blind person again, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I refuse to be blind. But she says, well, that's fine. But can I come out next week? I said, sure, if you want, but whatever. And she gave me a week. She gave me a week to think about it. And she came out and she said, can I show you this cane again? And all of a sudden she had me tapping it on the floor and come on, let's go outside. She was so nice. Just God knew exactly what I needed. And these two women, I can't imagine anybody else easing me into this transition than them. That's why I wrote about them in the book.
Yeah.
So important that God gave me those special angels to get me into adapting to be at least functional again. At least
Right.
functional.
And it's interesting how your love for playing cards is the catalyst that ended up getting you to learn Braille. Um, and something about this story, that this whole episode, this channel strictly exists to disciple, to encourage, and spread the gospel to the world. And your story sheds light on my understanding, or my lack of understanding of, I guess you could say, of faith. We have questions that we can have answered. Scripture doesn't tell us to believe and have blind faith. It's in fact, Peter tells us to, when someone asks us why we have hope, we're to give them evidence. We're to give them reason. We're supposed to help provide that evidence of why we believe. And what really something that we do have to take faith in with very little evidence is the spiritual realm. And though you used to see, though you had sight, or you were sighted, you were blind. And for many people that are blind, or at least born blind, they have to take it on faith that what is given to them, or the tools that they are using, are actual tools that will work and benefit them. And they have to trust. They end up having to trust that person who they can't see, and is instructing them, to be honest. And so when it comes to Jesus, he is the authority on the spiritual realm. He is the authority of all spirituality. Because he did something that no other person has been able to do, and that is to raise himself up from the grave and vindicate the claims that he made, and the healings that he did. And that is to claim that he is God. And so our faith in heaven, our faith in the afterlife, our faith in the spiritual realm is a trust in Christ, who is trustworthy. And what your story has done for me is recognize that the idea of, oh, if I can't see it, I won't believe it. If I can't touch it, I won't believe it. You have a story in there, and we'll get to it, I'm sure, where you end up meeting a young man who is both blind and deaf. And it made me laugh, because you had no understanding of why this guy, I think his name is Charlie,
Right.
he's laughing. You're working in this job, and you're in something called the tube room, and
Yes.
you he starts laughing, and you're asking, I think, your supervisor, why is he laughing? Or he's like, hey, Charlie's
Yeah.
over there laughing, and you ask him, why is he laughing? I don't know.
You had
It's
no idea why you're
I
laughing. Yeah.
had no idea why he's laughing. And your explanation, hey, go read the book. I'm telling you, people, go read this book. It's really good. Um,
Mm,
your explanation for that is there's no way for us to know what was in the mind of Charlie. We don't know what was in the heart of Charlie to give him this laughter, to give him this joy, and that opened you up. You telling that story opened you up to realizing that the suffering that I go through, the pains that I have, and it's not just Charlie. It's not just this man Charlie that you talk about. You end up going to a facility where there's a lot of people that you end up meeting that were sighted and made blind, that have horrible stories. Um, and you end up saying something in the book that you're like, yeah, my story is really not that bad compared to them. At least that's what you're kind of insinuating in chapter
mhm,
13. um
yeah. Especially the Albany experience.
yeah, the
Yes.
Albany experience, that's right.
Mhm, yeah. Mhm. One thing that's interesting about blindness, I sponsored a guy, a buddy of mine, in a seminar one time, and we had to do one of the things we would do was meditate, and they call it a guided meditation with rainbow centering. And what they do to bring in the meditation is go through the colors of the rainbow, red, orange, green, blue, purple, yellow, all the colors. And so we went through it together. I went through it with him because I'm blind. He's blind, but he's blind from birth. And after that night, he called me up and he says he knew that I could see one time. And he asked me, he says, Dan, what does red look like? And it's fascinating to me because what does yellow look like? And all I can say is, well, hold a banana. I don't, what am I going to
Yeah.
say? You know?
Right. Right.
And most blind people from birth learn that red is hot, kind of thing, and because they had never seen it, they'd never experienced it, where I have. But that was fascinating to me, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah. And the fact that with Charlie McCasey was so powerful in my life, God used him as a tool because I thought I had it so bad. And here I had to learn in order to communicate with him. I was given the responsibility to communicate with him and train him in every aspect of the job. And in the book, it talks about how dangerous the job was.
Yes,
We
yes,
had
it
that.
does.
It's glycerin is shampoo without the soapy, without the suds. So it feels like shampoo. But this stuff is heated up to 380 degrees. And in order to form the plastic that we were forming plastic, and I had to teach Charlie how to do this, and and then how to use a timer, and it was like with their blind technology, and it was absolutely fascinating that I was given that experience. It was a very very unique experience, and I'll never forget Charlie. He really inspired me because he lived on his own, and he took a bus back and forth to work on his own,
A
and
deaf and blind person that lived
yes.
on his own, and
Yes.
that right there just it blew my mind too. That was another thing because you mentioned that he lived on his own and he took care of himself in that
Mhm.
regard. And I can't imagine uh a scenario of my life where I could function without my sight and my hearing, or you know what, I really need to hear, or I really need to see. That it's so it really just goes to show how much we take for granted, what we the tools that we have, the natural capabilities that we have with our hearing, our feelings, our when I say feelings, meaning our touch, the how we're able to touch things and see uh uh and experience that. And here's a man that's experiencing life without vision, without sound, yet is having communication with people when you grab his hand, because you talk about uh, using hand sign language in his hand, and he had to learn that somehow. He had to learn that what was going on in his hand is communication. And
Yes.
that, to me, it is unfathomable. Like, I can't fathom having to learn that what I'm learning is something by somebody doing something in my hand. Um, I don't, I don't, I don't know how that works. I can't envision how that works, but the fact that I trust that the story that's here is true, because I know there are people out there that are born deaf and blind, and that are functional.
Yeah. Um, Charlie was a gift to me from God because, like I started out the story, coming from depression and loneliness and self pity. God allowed these things to happen in my life. Blindness was the worst thing that could have happened to me. And then after I went blind, things got much worse. Now, that kind of scenario doesn't sound good. But then God allowed these other circumstances in my life, and He designed my course, I believe, um, because He allowed me to go through these circumstances and learn about myself, and ultimately learn about God. That He was the designer and author and finisher of my faith. That He allowed me to go through these circumstances with Charlie, with Jimmy, with the people in the Albany experience, to get me finally out of myself. Because inside myself is the loneliest, hardest place I know, and I don't want to go back there.
Yeah,
He learned me that that there's a scripture, Philippians, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and I have that on a rock on my desk here. And but I didn't know that at the time. That's where the two-car garage. Did you read about that?
I did. Yeah.
Well, that's where after the CBVH Angels, they came in, and I was, they weren't there all the time, so I was like spending a lot of alone time, and I was feeling sorry for myself in the recliner, that was my little throne, and the phone rang, and it was my favorite Uncle Bill. And I ran to get the phone and cast on both legs and crutches and blind. I, so I answered the phone and I said, "What can I do for you, Uncle Bill?" And he said, "Danny, do you think you can change the brakes in my car?" And my first thoughts were, "Oh, do you know who you're talking to? A lame blind man?"
Yeah.
That's what my first thoughts were.
Yeah.
I said, "Uncle Bill, you don't understand. And I've been in an accident kind of thing." But I didn't say that. What
Right.
I said, what came
Right.
out of my mouth was, "Why don't you pick up the pads and I'll see what I can do?" And so I said, "Okay, and I'm just going left foot, right foot, what's in front of me." And I
Yeah.
told him to come out, and I went down to the garage, and my garage was all organized. Everything's in place. I know where every tool is. I know where everything is. Everything's in its place and functional. Just in case I get my eyes back, I wanted everything set. Okay. And just in case, of course, I couldn't use it because I'm blind. So he brought the car in, and he was a carpet layer. He never touched a wrench in his life for cars. So I gave him a seat, and I sat down there, and so I decided to try it, and I took the hydraulic jack and lifted one side up, took the tire off, the caliper, C clamp, put the pads in, put the caliper back on, tightened it up, put the tire back on, and I went and did the other side, and put that all back together. And I just, when I reached for the wrenches, I knew where they were. Okay. So I put them there, and I said, I opened the hood. I said, "Uncle Bill, check the brake fluid."
Yep.
I took the cap off, and he looked at it. He said, "Looks good. It's right up there, Danny." I said, put it back on, and I shut the hood, and I said, "Try it out." And he pumped up the brakes. And he went down the road and he came back. And I walked out there with my crutches in the driveway. And he pulled up next to me. He said, Danny, how much do I owe you? I said, you don't owe me anything, Uncle Bill. And he said, thanks a lot, Danny. And he left. And that changed my whole life. That changed my whole. I didn't know I could do that. And so meanwhile, my brother had brought over an engine in a little Plymouth Valiant. It was sitting outside my garage. It's a real eyesore, and my wife's bugging me all the time. Get Kenny over here to put that engine in. Get it out of here. Get it out of here. So after Uncle Bill left, I took my crutches and I bumped into the car. I'm thinking about that engine that's over on the grass. And I said, why not? And I put a chain around the engine, a chain from the chain hoist to the engine, and I dragged it in with a chain hoist and I lifted it up to about head level. And then I took my crutches out to the car. It was on flat ground, so I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, feeling my cane where the door was. And I pushed it, finally got to in front of the door, the opening, and I pushed the car in under the engine. And I dropped the engine down in there, and I had all the bolts in one pan. And I started feeling around, and I put the engine and the motor mounts in, and I hooked it up to the transmission, and then I got that all mounted in, and I put the radiator in, and I put the transmission lines in, and I put the hoses on, the belts on, I put the alternator on. And then I had to put the distributor on, because it was in the bucket too, and all the wiring, and all the spark plugs. And I put the spark plugs in, and I remembered the wiring order from the junkyard, 2643, yeah. 152643, yeah. So I felt around where it should be number one, and I hooked up all the wires, and I put all the fluids in, the radiator, and make the oil, and I put the key in the ignition, and it started popping real bad, pop, 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 and so I said, oh shoot, I put the distributor in backwards, so I pulled it out and I turned it at 180 and put it back in and tried it again, and the car started up. It was running good. Didn't even need to time it. And while it's running, my brother Kenny pulls in the driveway, and he sees the car running, and he says, "Who put the engine in there, Dan?" And I said, "I got it done." "Oh, thank you, Danny. I didn't know you could do that." And we put the hood on, we pulled it out. He went home and got his wife, and they drove it home.
Yeah. So that had to
Yeah.
boost your confidence up quite a bit. You know, here you are,
Yes.
you have no confidence when you see. Here in your
Right.
blindness, you're starting to gain confidence. Stories like changing the brake pads out and the brakes for your uncle, and here you put an engine back in the car. I imagine there had to have been confidence whenever you were
Oh
taking
yeah. That.
Jimmy to the convenience store, getting him to a convenience store so that he could get a Coke of some sort into his system.
Yeah.
um and uh so those small stories, or each one of those stories, the thread that goes through to where you are today, and we'll get there here in a moment. The Albany experience is another one of those stories that I think that the listeners would really find fascinating, and uh, one particular one was in the Albany experience was this girl. I don't remember if you gave the name of her, but she said that she was blind too, and she had witnessed a murder.
Yeah.
Do you remember much about her, or was that just that conversation with her? Was it just that pretty short, your interaction with her? Because
Well,
that,
that depression and loneliness came back because I didn't want to go to Albany. I did
okay,
not want to go there in the first place because I had two kids and I didn't want to leave the family. But this is the only
explain
place you
what
can go to.
explain what Albany is for those who don't know.
Albany is a city two cities away from me, 200 miles from my home, and I had to take a bus ride there, 5.5 hours. And it's a place where it had a blind school for the blind, and people from all over the state just went to Albany to learn how to be blind. So to do besides what Linda and Sue did for me, I had to learn a braille class and mobility and all that stuff. But there was a lot of free time there, and I didn't like it. I was very lonely. The boarding house I was in, I had to stay in my. It was ridiculous because I was 3 years sober at the time, and these were like severe alcoholics I was living with that wanted me to drink with them.
Mm,
It was very challenging. And so I didn't want to be there in the first place, and it was very lonely in that room. I had to stay there most of the time, other than school. And I went to school, and I had a lot of free time there. There was only classes, like one class, two classes out of 8 hours. So I'm walking down the hall, and I bump into this girl. She's got a cane, I got a cane. I said, "Excuse me," and then and we started chit chatting. And then I says, "I'm sorry, I'm totally blind." She says, "So am I." I said, "Really?" And I got talking with her, and I said, "Oh, do you mind if I ask why you're blind?" She says, "I witnessed a murder." I said, "What do you mean you witnessed a murder?" She said, "Yeah, I saw the guy got killed, and they poured lye in my eyes, so I couldn't be an eyewitness, so I couldn't identify him." And that floored me. I said, "Wow, oh my God!" And it's the only time I met her. I mean, I didn't do anything
okay,
else, you
okay,
know.
yeah,
Yeah, and then this other guy, he reminded me of Vinnie Barbarino from Welcome Back, Kotter.
okay,
Okay, this guy, I was talking to him. I said, and I says, why? How come you're blind? And I told him what happened to me. My battery acid story is pretty strong. I said, "What happened to you?" And he said, "Oh, I owned a bar in Florida." And he says, I got in an argument with this guy one night, and I called each other names, and I turned around, and he called me back, and when I looked back at him, he shot me in the face,
oh,
took both my eyes out. I don't know what he shot him with, but both eyes were gone.
yeah,
And he learned how to be blind. But Chris, in the break room, was 19 years old. And he was like a smart aleck kid. But he was, nice. We had a nice conversation. And it says, I'm coming back from the weekend. And I says, what's your class today? And he says, well, I was supposed to take mobility, but well, let me back up. He's got diabetes like Jimmy did, but worse. He only had a couple toes left, and he only had one arm. They had to cut off his arm.
yeah,
And he only had one arm because of diabetes, and his eyes, the vitreous fluid inside was like milk. He couldn't see through them. And I said, "Wow, can't they do something about that? Can't they clear that out? Put clear vitreous fluid in there?" He said, I had it done once, but it's too painful. I'd rather stay blind." And I said, "What class are you taking today?" And he says, "I'm supposed to take mobility, but I got drunk over the weekend, fell downstairs, and broke my only wrist."
yeah, yeah,
And here I am feeling sorry for myself. I'm wondering what's going on here because why am I meeting these people? You know?
yeah, yeah.
And and then and then Sue. I met Sue. Sue's in a wheelchair. She's my age and just a really pretty voice. And we got talking. It's like friendship, immediately friendship. She's so nice. And I asked what happened to her. And I said, and she says, "Well, when I was 16 years old," she says, "I broke up with my boyfriend and I was walking out of his house and he shot me in the back with a shotgun and paralyzed me from the waist down." I said, "Wow. Oh, man." I said, that made you blind too? She said, no, no, I was in the hospital for a couple months. And my parents were finally taking me home, put my wheelchair in the trunk and put me in the front seat. And we got in a head-on collision on the way home. And my face went into the windshield and took both my eyes out. I said, oh my God, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I was upset. I was upset because of her, you know. And she took my hand. She said, Dan, it's going to be fine. You're going to be all right. I'm going to be a secretary and you're going to be just fine. Okay? And I said, wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. You
For a
know,
place I didn't want to be, you know, God directed this and He brought these people into my life and I had to write about them. I had to. It was incredible.
when it comes to Sue, what I find fascinating, though you didn't have like this breakup that, that dealt with this revenge of shooting you in the back, you have two stories with her that, you have this one where this unforeseen event where she ends up getting shot in the back, leaving her paralyzed from the down below. You got through, and it reminded me from the beginning of your book when you're talking about being on your motorcycle and you're being flown in the air and you're paralyzed for 10 months, and you get back up after 10 months. You're going to dance, and you're on the dance floor with the girl, and you feel or hear this snap in your legs, and you're back in a body cast.
Yeah.
um you ultimately leading to another vehicle accident, that battery acid comes into your eyes, and the character that this girl had just seemed so full of hope when I was reading that as well. Like, this girl's, it's almost as if you were there to entertain an angel, and she was an angel passing by, appearing as a human. It almost seems that way. And it's like, I'm going to tell you a
Yes.
story, and I'm going to tell you a story that's going to let you know that it's going to be okay. And you didn't know that. You didn't know it was going
No,
to
I
be
didn't know that.
okay.
No, no. I didn't have much hope until God showed me the way. You're not alone. And
So
you
when do you start the change in your life to begin to accept um God's providence in your life?
yes, I'd like to explain that because in my deep turmoil in my home, with her not wanting to be married to a blind man, and I was separated from a lot of people, my brother, oldest brother, came in, the one that was driving the car
Hmm.
when I went blind, and he got a DWI as a result of that accident. And he was court ordered, and he went into AA, and he found recovery, and he started getting sober. And he felt so bad. I can't imagine me driving, having my brother coming out blind as a result of my driving. I just he lived with that for a long time, 35 years of having his brother being blind because of his actions. Okay, it had to be horrible on him. But anyway, he got recovery, and he wanted me to have it too. And he kept coming over to my house, wanting to take me to a meeting. And I said, nope, nope, I'm fine. I'm not hurting anybody but myself. Just I'll drink my beer. Just leave me alone. You know, just I want my beer. That's all. And finally, this one time, he offered again. He came in, and my girlfriend says, "Why don't you go? It might help you." And that anger at that instant turned. I turned to my brother and I said, "If I go, will you never ask me again?" He said, "Yes." So I went with him, and here's where everything started. I sat there so alone, and it's a bunch of people that were. Everybody was talking to somebody, and they were laughing. Even with all these horrible stories, they were laughing and getting along, and they had a good time together. And then the big event happened when the chairperson shared his story in an honest way, a very honest with himself way. And I couldn't believe he was telling us all these people, these secrets of his life. You're not supposed to do that kind of thing. And here's where the magic came in, because even though I looked like a monster, I had casts and crutches, and boy, I had to seem unique. I was just unique enough not being blind. I mean, just unique enough just sitting there, besides being blind. And I noticed that everybody had somebody to talk to, and the thing is, these people accepted me for who I was. Unconditional acceptance and unconditional love. And this was 3 years after I lost my dad. Remember when I told you he was my only source of unconditional acceptance and unconditional love?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes. Well, here it was again, and I wasn't realizing it, but it didn't matter to them, me sitting there. They just accepted me for who I was. And so after the meeting, I was wondering about what happened there. And all the way home, 9 miles home, I was waiting for my brother Bill to say, "You want to go again?" And I was bracing myself to say no, you know, but he didn't say that. And God worked on my hurt all the way home. And so he dropped me off at my house, and he had to go up to the end of my driveway to turn around. And by the time he turned around, he's coming back down the driveway. I went out to his car, and he opened the window. He says, what do you want?" I said, "When's the next meeting?" And I haven't had a drink since that day. The night before, actually. But I kept going to meetings, and I didn't plan on going back anymore, because here I am. I'm different. I'm a blind guy. And they kept coming up to me after the meeting and says, "Oh, I hope to see you again. Next meeting, you coming tomorrow night?" I thought, "Well, I don't know. And this one guy says, "I'll pick you up." Whatever. And then I got to the point where I love what they were saying. They were sharing from their heart. And I wanted to do that so bad. So like a week went by, and I did the ultimate. I raised my hand, and I said, "My name's Dan, and I'm an alcoholic." And I thought everybody was going to gasp. Oh my God, kind of thing. But I shared what it was in my heart. And here's another piece of magic. After the meeting, a guy come up to me and he says, "Thank you so much for sharing. That's meant so much to me. I hope you come back." And talk about God working in your life. I didn't know what it was to be outside of myself.
Mm.
I thought self-centeredness was my way of life.
Yeah.
And you know what I found out too? That self-pity I had and that depression, that's self-centeredness. That's self-centeredness. It's all. And I had to learn the difference between self-centeredness, other-centeredness, and God-centeredness. So I kept going back to meetings, and these people just accepted me for who I was. And for a while I was blind Dan, the blind guy. But all of a sudden there was a transition then too. I went from being Dan the blind guy to just plain Dan. And it didn't matter what I looked like. And I started doing service work. And it turned my life around. And it was a lot different than the treatment I was getting at home. Because at home, it was dysfunctional. It was what we knew, and how to process things with anger and resentments and stuff like that. And there was nothing like that at the AA meeting. It was all acceptance and love. And that's what I needed. God knew I needed that. And they don't pummel you with God. They don't force God down your throat. But the 12 steps introduce you to God very slowly, very gradually. And you suddenly realize that, yeah, there's a higher power in charge here. It's not just them. And so I became a member of AA and started doing service work. And I had this friend, another sponsor of mine. His name was George. And I loved George because he was funny. I loved humor because in AA, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Okay. But I love humor and I love laughing, and this guy was funny. Oh my God, he was funny. And this other lady, Ruby, she was funny. She had all the old bar jokes from long ago. She kept saying them, and everybody was laughing, and I loved to laugh. And these two people just made me laugh and made me keep coming back to them. But anyway, George was this praise the Lord guy. He was this Christian, and whatever. I just like to hear him laugh. And I was down and out. I used to talk to him. He said, "Dan, why don't you go to church with me?" I said, "No, that's good for you. And AA is fine. AA is just fine. I'm good." And he asked me several more times, and I turned him down. But this one time, I was hurting bad enough. There's a saying, we have a phrase that's called pain is the touchstone of all spiritual progress.
Mm.
And God allowed me to go hurt again, hurt enough in my dysfunctional relationship. When George asked me this time, "You want to go to church, Dan? Come on, come with me." And I said, yes. I went to church with him. So I went to church with him, and we're in the pew after they sang the songs. And this guy up at the pulpit, this preacher, started talking, and God was talking directly to my heart through that man. I couldn't believe it. And here's the thing. Is it possible that I can be forgiven for what I've done? And he kept talking about salvation and forgiveness and grace. What grace is? Grace is, the acronym for grace is God's riches at Christ's expense. And I love that.
That's
But
good.
is it possible? But I was debating, I was standing there in front of that pew. Is it possible that I could be forgiven for what I've done? And he kept explaining it. I said, oh my God, this is real. I'm forgiven. And I didn't think that was even a possibility. Zach, it blew my mind that somebody like me and all the things I've done, that I could be forgiven. And I talked to George about this. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I was like born again, clean as snow, white as snow. I couldn't believe it. Everything I've ever done, God wiped away. It was bad. And it's okay to look back, but don't stare, because God has forgiven me. He's made me white as snow. And I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a born again experience right there at that pew that day. And God
That's
knew
wild.
exactly what he was doing. He put George in my path to get me there. And I always wanted to thank George, and I just found out he died like 5 years ago.
Oh man.
Yeah, but I always wanted to thank him for doing that. But you know what? For a while, I put him and the preacher on a pedestal, and I considered them God. And I found out that was a mistake to do. And I praised George in the truck. We're riding together, and I said, "Man, it's you, George. It's all about you." And he said, "No, it's not me, man. It's not me. I'm just planting a seed. No, God's in charge. It's Jesus, man. It's Jesus." I said,
That's good that he
"Okay,
was able to, keep keep the humbleness and just deflect that and give it all back to Christ.
he
Um,
did.
that's
He did totally."
that's
Mhm.
awesome that God put George in your life. And for whatever reason, George needed to be there at AA. For whatever reason, George needed to be redeemed. For whatever reason, George's story had to lead to that particular place where you end up meeting him. Uh, because this has led you into your own ministry, right? A ministry that God has that you've answered and at least said yes to God.
Yes, yes, yes. And
Um,
in fact, I took the 12 steps of EA, which there was like 350 other programs, more than that now, derived off these 12 steps. It's not just alcohol; it's smoking, addictions, there's all kinds of addictions, and
right.
you can use the 12 steps for all of them. What I did was take the 12 steps and took the word alcohol out of it, and we were powerless, and our lives have become unmanageable. This is open to anybody, and I created a group called Blind Faith. and we take the 12 steps, and it doesn't matter what your problem is. Everybody's got problems, and we can talk them out, and you can come to your own solutions and meet God on, on your terms. And we can talk about God and what He's done in each other's lives, and basically share our experience, strength, and hope. Because I, if I didn't go blind, I can't tell somebody I know how you feel that's blind. Okay, God's given me the gift of going there, being done that. Alcoholism and the stuff I've been through. It's not all helpless and hopeless. It doesn't have to be. Not with God's power, not with His strength. It doesn't have to be. So you can turn your will and your life over to God. And my biggest thing is getting out of my own way most of the time. If I get out of my way, God can do His thing, and
Yeah.
it's a great feeling. And I found out there's a difference between happiness and joy. Joy is inside. Joy is because of what God's done in your life, in my life. And I realized how much I took for granted. I realized how much I hurt people, I've been given the opportunity to make amends. Not many people don't even know that they can make amends to other people. So a
Right.
lot of people don't even know that they've even hurt other people.
That's right.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that I by hurting myself, I was hurting other people. I had no concept of that whatsoever. Nothing.
As you dig a deeper hole, it's the personal closeness that I have with certain people in my life that that have gone down self-destructive means that the thing that hurts the most, I think, at least on my end of it, is the torn relationship. It's seeing that I am powerless to change their life. In the same sense, you know, Dan, I was 388 pounds, and in the course of less than a year, I have gotten. I am skinny. I am super skinny with a lot of skin, and I'm under 200 pounds. I'm 197 pounds. The no, but nobody could lose the weight for me. I had to take the steps to do it myself. And it's the same thing. Like, you could lead me, you could give me the information that I need, but the only way that that information becomes useful is if I apply it. And the same thing
Yes.
happens for the people that are around me. And the same thing happened for you, is that you were given information, and the only way it becomes useful is if you apply it. And you become a testimony of the applied wisdom. You become a testimony of the applied strength, um, and you are able to encourage others because of the experience that you have. And so that same thing is in a same in a way, though I've never gone through alcoholism, I've never had those struggles of those types of addictions. The addictions that I've had have from an early age, it was pornography for a long period of time, and sugar, like Reese's peanut butter cups, root beer. It took a while for me to get rid of root beer, and when I did, I'd been free from the root beer for over 20 years, and but it it was still sugar. There was still peanut butter cups and cookie dough and cheesecake and all that other stuff that was destroying my life, absolutely destroyed my life. And you don't realize the hurt that it has on other people, even in the obesity. I recognize I could die at a young age if I continue down this path. And how is that fair to my son? How is that fair to my family? How is that fair to my siblings? um, to rob them of having a healthy life and being there and being around them, my in-laws and my church family, my friends. uh, you hurt so many people just in the relationship when you do destructive things to yourself.
Yeah. Well, for sure. So, but on their end, experience is the best teacher. And that's why God allows these things. I look back in my life and I see design, God's design. And one of the things that helped set me free is like God didn't make these bad things happen to me, but He allowed them,
Hmm.
and He still had providence over me, and He saved my life, obviously, several times. And that He had a plan for my life, and now I went from learning how to be when I was self-centered, how to be other-centered, and then finally put the focus on pointing to God. And He let me go through the pain to get to that point. And now I feel like He's designed this so He can work through me in a whole new way that I never knew was. I never knew what it was.
So Dan, you were a technological instructor, correct? For the blind?
Yeah, that's after working at this workshop for 23 years. They recognized my skills, and that's when I started at the tube room there. I was talking, but they recognized my skills with computers. That's when computers were just coming out, talking products, and that's all they had alone. The alone time. Here's another thing that God gave me. When Jill took the kids and left me alone for the day again and again and again, I had the computer there, and I had to dig in real hard how to learn how to use a computer, and I became very proficient at it, very good at it. And then they got the computers at work, and for the blind, but nobody knew how to use them. I said, well, I can use them. I know how to use it. And the general manager says, show me. And I showed him. And he says, how would you like to teach our supervisors? And I says, yeah. And it wasn't too long after that, they gave me my own office with a computer, made me the planner scheduler. So all the manufacturing parts I had to keep track of, inventory, and plan what to order for the company. And I did that for like 12 years. And but what I really wanted to do, what I learned from AA, was to share my experience, strength, and hope. And I wanted other blind people, to have this technology. And they were throwing out all the old computers, and I said, "Can I have them? I want to give these people. I want to fix them up and give them to the blind people." And because it was very rewarding to help somebody else, I found out. And and finally they deceived me, and they ended up throwing them out before they gave them to me. They led me up to the point where they were going to get to me. So I realized I wasn't going to be able to get my goal of being a technology instructor for the blind. That's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So finally, I decided I'm done with this. I'm going to retire from there after 23 years. And my friend told me, why don't you come down to Florida? It's nice down here. And I hated the winter. It was getting so hard on me, and it was affecting my body worse and worse every year. So I went down there to visit him, and I went to the Orlando airport. My wife took me outside. I had a coat on, and my gloves and hat were in my pocket. We stepped outside. It was 72 degrees and sunny. I turned to my wife and I said, "We're moving to Florida." Oh yeah, I had to have it. I had to have it. And so we visited. We came down there for like a month at a time for the next couple of years, looking for a place. And Ross, my friend Ross, says, I'm not going to use my place anymore. Right? I'm trying to sell it. You want to buy it? I said, yeah. So I bought his place, and I kept going back and forth because with Excel, it really helped me because I could figure out my budget right to the penny. I knew exactly how much we were making, and if Diane worked, we could make it. So Diane got this job, and I'm doing the housework in Florida in the wintertime. Really enjoying it, but I'm getting kind of bored. And so I go on the computer, and I'm looking for a place for the blind, if there's any workshops down here in Florida. And the first place popped up, and I seen the phone number, and I called. Just so happened that the CEO of the place answered the phone because the secretary was on lunch. And she says, "Can I help you?" And I says, "Yeah, my name's Dan, and do you have anything for a blind person to do?" She says, "I don't know. Who are you?" And I told her who I was and what I did, and computers and stuff. She says, "I want to talk to you." So we went in and made an appointment, went in to see her, and we sat down at her desk, and I told her what I did. She says, "Do you think you can volunteer for us and teach our teachers how to teach blind people?" I said, "Sure, I can do that." And, I didn't know what God had in mind here. But, she ran the transportation and everything. And every day I went in there, and I'm teaching the teachers in this one room how to teach blind people. And it went very well. And they were
That's
started
awesome.
teaching the blind. They started teaching the blind people. And so I'm going home. I'm saying goodbye to everybody, going home for the last time. And the CEO calls me in their office. Can you come over and see me for a minute before you leave? I said, "Yeah." I went over there. I said, "What can I do for you?" She said, "Dan, we'd like to offer you a job as a technology teacher for the blind." And I started laughing because this is what I wanted all along. This is what I wanted in the first place.
That's
And
awesome.
it is awesome. And I became a technology instructor for the blind, and I found out there was like 4 other teachers in there, and they gave me the hard ones because they knew how patient I am with people. And it was wonderful. I was out of myself. And here's the key about this technology job. I'm in a different way. I'm sharing my experience, strength, and hope with other people, and they're not just alcoholics. But my students come in, and I told them, each one of them, I says, "Okay, we're going to sit down. I'm going to teach you how to do this, but I'm going to teach you unto the point where you can teach others."
Awesome.
Right?
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
That's fantastic.
and
Dan, what would you give for those who are sighted? What kind of advice would you give for those who are sighted, who can see, to better understand the scriptures? What piece of wisdom do you have that could encourage them to spread the gospel? And if they don't know the gospel, how they can know that Jesus Christ is truly Lord and Savior?
well, one of my favorites is Corinthians. We walk by faith and not by sight. Faith was turned my life around, and I had to give it a try. And that God, to know that God's in charge of all things at all times, and He allows things to happen. Oh, that's what set me free. He allowed things to happen. He didn't make bad things happen. He allowed them to happen to me.
Right.
Yeah, and this is all design. Um, but I realized that God loves us so much, more than I can imagine. I didn't know that I was loved by God the way I was. Um, but one of my wife's favorite scriptures, Proverbs 3:5-6, lean not unto your own understanding. Through prayer and supplication, leave all things to God. Um, my own understanding of what got me there in the first place, my own way of life, what I learned. And you can learn bad things. I mean, I learned about actions and consequences. And I thought that meant that bad things are going to happen to you because you're going to do these bad actions. And like, that's all I knew. I had to learn that doing positive actions can lead to positive consequences. And these are all within God's structure, His laws. And I consider God's laws, like in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I
Hmm.
consider these like laws to live by. That God's, the first step is we admit that we're powerless and our lives to become unmanageable. That's surrendering. Okay. And then Second step, came to believe that the power greater than ourselves can straighten our life out, can restore us to sanity. And the third step is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. So these 12 steps in a nutshell come from the Bible themselves and all the scriptures in it. I have a reference to that someplace. But the first three steps is we surrender and we seek God. Next three steps are clean house to the point we take an inventory of ourselves and then make amends to others. And the last three steps are continue to take personal inventory and turn our will and our lives over to God as we understand Him, and then share this with others. Spread the good news. Share the gospel, in other words. So it's a condensed version of what the Bible is really saying. To get out of ourselves, help others, seek God. And of course, I mentioned I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Yeah.
I had no idea until I experienced what He could do through me. You know, those skills I had from the junkyard, that low self-esteem I had in comparing myself, I thought it was a bad thing. Now it's funny to look back because all those skills that I saw my dad gave me just by watching him. We had no money, and he did whatever it took to get the job done. It was amazing what he did with no money. But he got the job done, and he kept us kids fed. And that gave me life skills now to do things I can do even being blind. Because there's a lot of, thank God I'm living in this day and age, because back in the 30s, I used to put blind people in mental institutions because they didn't know what to do with them.
Right.
Now
Wow.
we got the technology with talking computers. I got a talking thermostat. I got a talking clock. I got a talking watch. I got a talking wife. That's just a joke.
That's great.
But with the computer,
Yeah.
I handle all the bills in most states. I do all the financing. I buy things online. eBay, I've been doing 25 years. I buy things on Amazon, delivered right to the house. I do banking. I do TV listings. I write letters. I take inventory and Excel, and I can even tie into other people's computers around the country. There's people I know that I tandem on their computers, and I fix their computer, adjust them. Sometimes they send them to me, and I fix them up.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. So there's two words that you learned a lot about. You mentioned them at the very end of the book. And I would like for you to just explain these two particular words for the audience here that's listening, grace and mercy, and what they mean to you, and how those two particular words have helped change your life and given you hope.
Yes. Yes. Like I said before, grace, the acronym for grace is God's riches at Christ's expense. God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. John 3:16. Well, you can hear that over and over and over again, but when you realize it, what He's done, um, I couldn't comprehend it. And what He went through for me and you and everybody listening is an incredible, mind-blowing thing. He actually gave His life because He loved us so much that He took our sins, anything we've ever done wrong, and put them in the grave, and He conquered death. So this means eternal life, and this gives me hope. This gives me hope that I'm going to be with Him in eternity without these tears down here, without these problems, without these disasters and all these the evil, the bad things that happen. This gives me hope that I'm going to be with Him in eternity, and I even have hope. And here's another thing I'll share personally that I feel. Jesus says to follow Him. I found out that God's not restricted to a building. Churches are good, But God's not restricted there. He's everywhere. He's in our hearts. Um, but I've found out that he's not restricted to a building, and we have access to him in his love for forgiveness. And so grace is a gift that I don't deserve. It's an undeserved gift. And when we realize, that when he raised from the dead, he gave us eternal life beyond this body. That's why in this body, sometimes I feel trapped or in bondage. And I have hope that I'm going to be able to see after this life, and it's going to be eternal bliss. Well, I know what I was going to get to. My personal feelings and thoughts about this, and this is not scriptural or anything, but Jesus says to follow me. That's what Jesus wants us to do. Do what I do.
Yes.
Now, watching him and knowing that he interceded for you, for me, and for everyone listening, knowing that he interceded for us, why can't I follow his example and intercede for my family? It won't hurt to ask. I pray for my loved ones. I pray to God, to Jesus Christ, if you want me to follow you, and I intercede for my family also and my loved ones. And so that's my personal thought on that. And because I found out what love is, grace and mercy is. Now, on the other hand, mercy is not getting what I do deserve, judgment. Asking God for mercy is not giving the penalty that I deserve because he loves us so much. God, have mercy on us. And thank you for grace. I thank him for grace every single day.
That's awesome. That is
You
awesome.
know, and here's another thing about this overall. I went to AA for 5 years, wondering what the answer was. Because everybody's sharing their stories and everything. Okay, yeah, that's good. Give hugs, love you, kind of thing. But after 5 years, I'm sitting there. I said, what's the answer? What's the answer? And I derived what the answer was. The answer is gratitude. And then I had to tie that gratitude into something. And the gratitude is realizing what God has designed in my life and allowed me to go through and brought me to this point. So I'm grateful to God every day. And when I get up in the morning, I thank him for letting me sleep. I thank him for the running water. I thank him for the flushing toilet. I thank him for the shelter I have. I thank him for him designing my life and giving me everything he brought me through and blessed me with. I just thank him for continuously through the day. And there's one song I put in the book. I couldn't put the whole thing in there because copyrights, but I'd like to say the words.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. Go for it.
a song called Make My Life a Prayer by Keith Green. And he died 2 months before I went to my first meeting in a plane crash with his 2 children. But it's so powerful. George gave me the tape, and I played it over and over and over again. And this song hit me like a ton of bricks. And the words go like this. I make my life a prayer to you. I want to do what you want me to. No empty words, no white lies, no token prayers, no compromise. I want to shine the light you gave through your son you sent to save us from ourselves and our despair. It comforts me to know you're really there. I want to die and let you give your life to me so I might live. I want to share the love you gave through your son you sent to save us. I'm sorry, I messed it up. But I'm going to give you this verse. I want to die and let you give your life to me so I might live. I want to share the love you gave. I want to share the love you gave to set me free. And oh, because it's so hard to see when my eyes are on me. That's a line that got me.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
so hard to see when my eyes are on me. So it's a beautiful song. You can even
it
look that
is.
up on YouTube.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Keith Green was a an amazing pianist and gospel singer.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would like to end this with a poem that you wrote, "As You Guide My Life," if that is okay.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
yeah, it's the final poem of your book, and his book is chock full of poems. Every chapter's has them, and the last chapter or his conclusion has a couple poems in there, and these are all written by Dan, and they are amazing. And go read his book, check out the poems. But this poem is called "As You Guide My Life." As you guide my life, I seek your face to know you just what to do. With all the things you put in place, I now know that you are true. At times, I don't know what to do. Sometimes it's hard for me. I have decided to have faith in you, to just do what's in front of me. For I am grateful to you always for all the things you've done, for guiding me in all your ways. My new life has just begun. So thank you, God, for saving me with your guided hand above, and all you've done has set me free with your everlasting love. Dan, I totally appreciate you coming on to the show today and just giving your testimony and sharing your life with us. Um, do you have any final thoughts? Anything that you would like to say?
Well, I'm so glad we came together again after all these years, Zach. And I really appreciate your ministry. And I thank you for letting me share this. And I just praise God that He's allowing me to have expressed my experience, strength, and hope through a book. And I pray that He uses it.
I
Um,
pray too. I would love to get this book out to as many people as possible as well. So I will be sharing that link down below. Hey, if you guys will share, like, and subscribe to the video, I will do this. Like, put it in the comment section that tag people in there, like tag a friend, share this. If you've subscribed and you like and you tag somebody, I will put you into a drawing. And the first five people that do it, I will personally buy you a book and have it sent to your house. You can get it in paperback, you can get it in Kindle version. Uh and I will personally get those books out to you. So like, share, subscribe, and tag somebody in there and you can get a book. And so, with that, thank you all for watching by the word of our testimony. The next video, it is my testimony, and one of the guys that you guys got to see before, Evan Grindle, give his testimony. He's going to be in the host seat, uh, and he's going to be interviewing me on my testimony. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. And God bless you
Thank you,
all.
Zach. Thank you,
So.
Zach.